Episode 62. Welcome to the KBD Podcast. Today we got another return guest, and we're going to be doing things a little bit differently moving forward. We got Bill Mitchell. We're going to have a little bit more of a structured podcast today. I'll get to the topics we're going to be covering. And just before we get the podcast started, I want to make a disclaimer that today's podcast is not to be construed as investment advice. And once again, we got Bill Mitchell, the portfolio manager of the Palos Mitchell Fund. Hopefully we can get a lot more of these podcasts moving forward, and we're going to talk more about current events, break it down. So today we're going to be covering, there's a lot of news going on. We're talking about this. Trump just got elected. There's some stuff going on in Canada. And so we're going to be looking at policy changes that are on the horizon with the Trump presidency, thoughts on controversial appointments. There's a lot of news going on there. Good news cycle. How tariffs might impact the economy. That's an interesting topic. Impact on financial markets. So the Trump presidency, is this good? Is this bad for financial markets? Are markets going to go up? Are they going to go down? Again, these are just predictions. No one knows what's going to happen to markets, but we'll get into that conversation. How to manage portfolio risk. That's going to be all you. And again, not to be construed as investment advice. These are opinions. This is Bill's opinion. This is not anything to do with the fund that he manages. This is his personal opinion. Last but not least, we got Canada's productivity woes. We got a big issue with GDP per capita. We got a massive issue with productivity. We want to bring attention to this, and we want people to realize how important it is to be a productive country. And if you don't have a productive country, the government can't take tax revenue to help pay for our welfare state and other social services as well. Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Was that a good intro?
It was.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to get to topic number one, subject number one. Trump just got elected. When was it? November 21st?
The vote was the 6th, was it not? I think Tuesday the 6th. Is that correct?
I think it's like almost a month ago now. Anyways, whatever it is. So policy changes that are on the horizon with the Trump presidency. And there's a lot of stuff. So a couple of things that he obviously campaigned on, and there's a difference between campaigning on something and if they can actually enact these changes. He wants to lower taxes. This is in a nutshell. Trump wants to lower taxes. Obviously, he's always campaigned on that. He wants a tighter border security in the U.S., deportation, emission standards, subsidies for electric vehicles, deregulation in the energy sector. These are some of the broad topics that we're going to go through right now. So let's get started on lower taxes. Trump won an election. One of the reasons he won an election amongst many, but we're going to focus on the economy today, was he campaigned on lowering taxes. So lowering taxes, is this good or is this bad for markets? And you mentioned, we were discussing a little bit earlier, that lower taxes will most likely result in, they're not going to make up the difference with regards to, how do I say this? It's most likely going to increase the debt, just because of the fact that, yes, when you lower taxes, technically there's more productivity, but I don't think that there's still going to be a shortfall. So is the debt going to increase? I would probably say yes. But one could also argue, I think we're in a position where the debt's not going to get paid off anyways. They're at $36 trillion in debt. The entire West, the entire world has all this debt, including China. That's a whole other topic we can get into. But you can't win a campaign. You can't campaign to cut costs, or to cut spending, excuse me. And cut costs technically. So I like the lower taxes. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but it's just the reality is the debt's not going to go anywhere, and the debt's most likely going to increase. I would even argue that the debt, you know how each president kind of like has more debt than all the other predecessors like combined? I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happened with Trump again this term. I think it's more of just the debt cycle the world is in. China has debt, the West has debt, USA has debt, Canada has debt, Europe has debt. Everyone has debt. Japan has debt. So
yeah,
so I guess my question is, the point you're making is, yes, so they lower taxes. Is that going to increase the debt? Most likely, but so what? That's my point.
I mean, Trump wants to, basically continue with the tax cuts he made in his prior administration, which are coming up for renewal or expiry, I believe, at the end of December 2025. Mm-hmm. And yes, lowering taxes lowers revenues to the government. So in theory, you have less money to pay down debt, which is a negative. But then the pushback will be lower taxes stimulate economic activity and growth, which results in increased tax revenues down the road. So it's a balance that nobody can really identify concretely, right? Like this is how it's going to work, and these are the numbers. You really don't know how it's going to play itself out. From a business perspective, from the business community, I mean, who doesn't like tax cuts? I mean, it's good for business. It's good for long-term planning. It's good for capital spending in the U.S. because you want to be in a jurisdiction where you're getting the best bang for your buck. If you are a business, you locate to the States, and we've seen a trend the trend is unprecedented with money flowing into the States historically right now.
Yeah.
So those are factors to consider. I mean, if it plays out that debt is becoming too much of a concern, the bond vigilantes will take care of that. In other words, the bond market will remind the government that, hey, debt's getting too big. You'll see it in the bond market because the bond market is the ultimate arbiter, right, of debt.
Is the bond market doing that right now?
It's pretty much given a pass. I mean, it's liked some of the the headlines that are coming out of the new administration, the policies. Even this morning, employment numbers were out, and the bond market took it well. Even though employment was kind of ticking up, depending which metric you use.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they can't do whatever they want. Like Trump can't do whatever he wants with taxes. There's going to be a lot of pushback from Congress, from interests. So, in theory, it's great for business. It's probably going to happen eventually. It probably won't be his first priority, right? Because he has until the end of 2025 to get this settled. So he'll so right now in Washington on Capitol Hill, there's either a two-step or we attack it all at once. So the two-step would kick that one down the road. But I mean, taxes are definitely, lower taxes is definitely stimulative for the economy, and business will welcome it. I think that's part of the reason why the markets have rallied.
Interesting. And then so one of the things that we want to touch on too, so with regards to policy changes that are on the horizon with Trump, is the border security issue. So number one, do you think that actually is this more just a political topic, or does this actually have any impact on markets? I'm not a market guy. I mean, I follow the markets. I don't work in the markets like you do. But does this have any impact on the markets, the fact that they're going to have a stronger border, or not really?
I think the view is that if you are aggressive in trying to remove undocumented immigrants from the economic system, let's call it, in the U.S., there's going to be fewer workers that are willing to work in things like restaurants and construction. A high percentage of the people that are the boots on the ground, as far as framing, working with concrete, moving materials around a job site, the people that are willing to work in 100-degree heat in Florida building a house. If you lose a lot of those people, it's going to be more difficult to build a house, quite frankly. You're losing your base of employees. Like, workers will be less. That's one threat that I think the markets see, because that will also be inflationary, right? And some of these undocumented immigrants actually work and pay taxes in the U.S. They're just not really officially allowed to stay in the U.S. So I think the whole thing is...
I didn't know that. Yeah. I thought if you're like undocumented, I thought if you're there legally, that like you basically worked under the table and didn't pay into the system.
Yeah, well, that for sure, that occurs as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's who he's targeting, right? From an election perspective, let's face it, a lot of what he wants to do is distasteful when it comes to human rights. But the reality is you have to protect your border. You can't just have an open border.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it more bark than bite? That's what I would suspect. Some southern states would push back, like Texas would push back, I'm sure, on economic impacts. At the same time, they want to close the border as well.
So they would push back on the fact that if they are super strict on deportations, that would drive wages up, which would be inflationary. That's the logic?
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And just for an example, take the construction industry. If you throw on top of that more tariffs on steel, copper, lumber from Canada, the price of homes are going to go up even more, which is more strain on the American consumer, which again goes against what Trump has said he was going to do, is make the cost of living more affordable for the average American. So he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, in my opinion. It might it might sit well with some people that we're going to, clean, bad immigrants out of the country. The reality is you need them. So there's a balance between that, right? Maybe a system that vets people more.
The way it used to be.
Yeah, the country's built on immigration. North America is built
and that's
on
something.
immigration.
This is where I'm gonna defend Trump. That's something where he's not saying we don't want to have immigration. He's just saying if you want to come to our country, you do so through the port of entry.
Yeah,
you come in legally. And Tom Homan, the bulldog border czar, that's kind of, I would not want to cross him. He said the same thing. If you want to come in, you do it through the port of entry.
Yeah,
and I agree with you. Countries need to have borders. And, there's news going on in Canada where we have not to the same, or at least I don't think, not to the same extent where we have illegal immigration in Canada, but, they've found people that came into our country illegally that are members of ISIS. There's all, if you just have a complete open door policy and anyone and everyone can come in, are the vast majority of them are going to be good people? I would think so. But there's going to be, even if 1% of 10 million people, and that's a conservative number for how many illegal immigrants have come in recently into the United States, even if 1% of that are bad actors, that's still a lot of people that can cause a lot of damage. And this is the debate I always have with my friends who are lefties. So they go, show me a study that says illegal immigration, that migrant crime is higher than regular crime. And it's not so much that. And again, there isn't really accurate data on that. It's more the fact that, my buddy, he literally writes in the text, show me a study where illegal immigrants commit more crime. And I go, dude, you put in the text illegal. They're just, we have to have rules. And my point is just like what I said a minute ago. If 1%, if 0.5%, if 0.1% of 10 million people are bad actors, that is an issue. You have to have rules. You have to have just common sense immigration policy. And if you want to come to our country or our countries in the West, you want to come to Canada, you want to come to the United States, there are rules, there are procedures you need to go through. We should be vetting them. I agree 100%. And this is not controversial. It shouldn't be controversial. And yes, it's nice to help people out in other countries and refugees, but we got to take care of our own first. We got a cost of living crisis here in Canada, not to the same extent in the United States, but again, this goes back to populism. People go, I'm Canadian, I'm American, America first, and I don't see anything wrong with that. That's my opinion.
I would say Canada first, so there's no problem from my point of view either.
Yeah.
We always look out for our own interest first.
Yeah, when did it become a bad thing to say, no, I want to prioritize Canadians first. We got to take care of our own before we start helping out other people. I don't see that as controversial.
No, sure. And it doesn't mean that we can't have collaboration or be very good friends with other nations.
Yeah,
that's obviously very important as well.
Yeah.
So, again, it was a popular campaign argument, right? A lot of it was probably exaggerated or not true,
Probably.
Gangs and drug dealers and stuff. There's domestic gangs and drug dealers as well.
Course,
and you're absolutely right. How do you measure it accurately? We can't.
No.
So, again, to use that as a campaign pitch to get elected and as he says, clean up the country as far as illegal immigrants goes, it might sound distasteful in a way. But bottom line, you're right. You have to protect the borders, but you cannot implement drastic change, especially if it's perceived by the rest of the world as being, overly aggressive. If you envision down the road scenes of federal agents dressed like military personnel breaking into a factory in Texas and dragging people screaming, away from that, that's going to hit the media, and it's going to leave a bad impression of the U.S. I think that's something else that if you look forward, right, could be used on both sides of the equation.
It's going to hit the media, but then again, immigration is one of the issues. This is why there's a rise in right-wing political parties across the West, because they feel, and I'm not saying this is my opinion, they feel as if they are losing the personality of their country. They feel as if they're losing the values of their country. This is happening in the UK. This is happening in Sweden. This is happening in France. This is happening all across Europe. This is happening in the US. This is happening in Canada. And so a lot of people agree with what we're saying. And I think most people who don't agree with what we're saying probably live in a gated community.
Yeah, well, listen, I agree with you. I agree with you. I mean, diversity is fantastic, you know.
Yeah.
If you love food,
Yeah.
I mean, Montreal, I mean, we've got every ethnic group with restaurants with fantastic food.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, you know, all immigrants and ethnicities bring amazing stuff to our culture, our open culture in Canada and the U.S. for sure. But, you know, at the same time, one thing that sticks in my mind and absolutely makes my blood boil is when you see protests in the streets where people would be chanting "Death to America" or burning the American flag. Makes my blood pressure shoot up. Like, there's no place for that.
I
like
agree.
Common values, yes. Basic values, yes. Freedom, democracy, freedom of speech, right to protest. But when you're doing stuff that is disruptive and hateful, there's no place for that in our country. And unfortunately, this is here. How do you get rid of it? I mean, I have my opinions on that. I won't express them publicly, but I mean, that's just unacceptable in our society to do stuff like that.
If you want to come to our country, you want to come to the West. I mean, you're here for a reason.
Yeah.
Just stay in the country. If you don't like it here, I mean, just stay at the country where you came from. So you're here for a reason. Adapt our values. And this is the same thing. And, you know, my father brought up a good point too, because we're having a conversation about this. And it's always somewhere in the middle. I mean, it was the same thing when the Italians came here generations ago. Same thing with the Irish. Same thing with the Polish. Same thing with the Ukrainians. Same thing. It's always the immigrants.
You forgot the Scottish, our common heritage.
Yeah, the Scots. But, you know, they come here, then the Irish set up mobs, and they're all gangsters. The Italians set up mobs too, and it's not all Italians, and I love Italians, but they're, you know what I mean. So there's always, when immigrants come in, the people that live in the country, there's always going to be a little bit of friction. This is normal. But we just need to have some type of a balance. And again, just want to kind of say this, and I know you agree with this. We are a nation built on immigration, and we need to have immigrants. But there needs to be procedures to follow in order for these immigrants to come to our country. I love Canada. I also love the United States. It's a great place to live. Come, adapt our values. There's nothing wrong with saying we need a vetting process.
Yeah. Immigration, values, rule of law, democracy.
I like that.
If you don't agree with that,
yeah,
then perhaps you should reconsider wanting to live here, because that's the way we want it here. It's the way we like it, in my view, and that's all it requires is just a belief in the same core values that we have.
What do we stand for as a country?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that makes us different from other parts of the world where you've got autocracy, or outright dictatorship.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's. I wanted to touch on this point as well. So emission standards. So another thing that Trump campaigned on, emission standards, subsidies for electric vehicles. That's kind of tied into this deregulation in the energy sector, deregulation as a whole. But one thing for sure, I guess, if we can wrap this up into a nice little bow, Trump, from what I understood from his rhetoric, was, hey, we want to drill, baby, drill. We need to be energy independent, not only to drop the price of energy, which is going to benefit the consumer, benefit the people of America. We also need to drop energy if we are to compete on a global scale, especially with the AI race. AI is going to require these server farms. For people that don't know, these server farms require massive amounts of energy to run. AI is, it's like, I was listening to this the other day too. I didn't know this. Every single time, if you want to go on Google, and AI, by the way, is requires a lot more energy to run than just Google. But even going on Google to run like a Google search, I think it was like 0.2 cents. So every single time you type something in and Google goes to get the answer for you, there's energy that's being used in the background. So back to Trump. What's his, you know more about this than I do, and you're very well versed in the energy space. So what's his plan for America with regards to energy and deregulation?
He wants independence, self-sufficiency, and reliability. If before, what I can recall or barely recall as a child was when, because of Mideast oil embargoes, I seem to remember my parents lining up, at a gas station trying to fill the car because we sort of abandoned, or he didn't have the capacity using old technology to have enough oil. So we relied on, external oil to come into North America with technology, fracking, horizontal drilling, efficiencies, all of this sort of stuff. America now is a net exporter of oil and gas.
Were they a net exporter before Trump's presidency in 2016?
Likely back then, yes. I think it's been a phenomenon that's been going on, let's say, for the last decade. But in the 70s, it was a threat, right? You had to put caps on gasoline consumption. It was really a strain on the economy to not be able to fill your car. So we learned lessons from back then, and I agree that energy independence is important. You don't want to be held hostage by another nation that's supplying you with oil.
Germany and Russia.
Right? Exactly. That's a great example.
Yeah.
It's a great example. We have plenty of it in North America.
And for the viewers, what Germany? What happened to Germany?
Well, they were reliant on
what's happening to Germany right now.
Well, they were reliant on Russian natural gas for electricity generation. They
shut down the nuclear plants.
They shut down their nuclear plants. While now the rest of the world is thinking about opening up new projects for nuclear, particularly with small modular reactor technology. Now it's a lot easier to build one than it was years ago when it would take a decade to get approved and built. So there was some policy errors, and of course with the invasion of Ukraine and Russian energy basically being sanctioned, Europe was caught again reliant on solar and wind as well. And if I said this before, if the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you need a reliant source of energy, which generally is natural gas or coal generated, or nuclear generated. So that's what Trump wants to see, and that's where Canada is positioned in a very good spot. Sheer logistics, we're their next door neighbor. We have tons to export to the U.S., which we do. The pipeline system is designed so that we are, we're providing natural gas to essentially parts of the Midwest and the entire west coast of the U.S. And the gasoline that goes into Americans' gas tanks comes from heavy oil. The refineries in the U.S., the Midwest, and particularly in the Gulf Coast, are designed to refine Canadian heavy grade of oil. There's really this is just a quick lesson on let's say oil dynamics. There's really three sources of heavy crude on this side of the world, and it's Canada. It's like the Alberta tar sands, synthetic heavy crude. You've got Venezuelan, which of course has been sanctioned in the past, and you've got Mayan heavy, which comes out of Mexico. But Mexico has their own refinery build-out going on, so they're going to retain most of their production for domestic use for their own refineries. So where else are these refineries that you just don't rebuild those overnight, going to get their feedstock to refine gasoline for American drivers? It's from Canada. It's from Canada. There's nowhere else to get it from. So that's why I kind of look at Trump's threats on tariffs. I'm not the only person that thinks this way. It's almost impossible that he puts tariffs on Canadian oil and gas,
it's not gonna
because that's a tax on Americans, and that's higher inflation. It hurts the economy. It goes against everything that he's been pushing for. So I think, I'll call his bet, and I'll raise him 4 million barrels of oil on his threat to tax Canadian energy. I think I'm right, but
I would agree.
He can be a little bit erratic. He may push that, but to me, there's no chance that that's realistically what's going to occur.
So if you had to wrap it up into a nice little bow, what would you say the markets liked most about the Trump presidency, the fact that he won the presidency? Just from a global perspective, a vague perspective.
One or three?
Whatever you want. You could say one or three.
Deregulation is one.
Yeah.
Realistic policies with regards to things like carbon emissions, certain policies that are expensive and not proven to work, that would go along the lines of ESG, for example, and just pragmatic management of the economy. Like let's get real. We just cannot keep taxing and letting debt levels rise because eventually you have to pay the piper. So I like the fact that, those are all pro-business policies, which really, I forget who said it once, but it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what people care about, because
Yeah.
when you can't maintain your standard of living, that's, I think, a tough pill to swallow for any nation or for any populace. And we're seeing that in Canada.
And I've always said this, I've been saying the same thing too. So it's like our current government, they keep hammering this climate crisis hoax down our throat. Yeah, I called it a hoax. It's some people say, is the temperature changing? Yes, the temperature is changing. And I work in insurance. Are there more catastrophic losses? Are there more hurricanes? Yes, there are. Do we have an impact on it? Probably. But try explaining that to somebody who is living paycheck to paycheck and can't feed their family. They don't care. They want to be able to live day to day. If you can't get by your day-to-day life, you're not going to care about what's happening to the climate. It's like the logic of, if we want to basically help the climate, I forget the environmentalists whose theory this is. If you want to go to India and someone's living on $1 a day and they can't feed their family, you're not going to convince that person that they should care about the environment and care about being clean. What they're going to care about is feeding their family. So in order for people to actually care about the environment more, and I'm not saying that we don't need clean energy, and we've done a good job, but if you want them to care about the environment more, raise their standard of living, because then they can start to focus on other things besides living day to day. They can get by day to day easily. Now they can start focusing on, hey, maybe we should be buying nuclear energy. Maybe I should be trying to use more solar. Maybe I should be trying to use more wind. And, places like, to the point you just said a little bit earlier, a place like the UK, this was on the podcast, listen to the Looney Hour on a regular basis, the guy Rich, so he said there are some days where the entire grid of the UK is powered by solar and wind. There are days, but there are also days when it's not windy and it's not sunny, the grid is not powered by that. And where do they have to go get the energy? Coal, or they have to go get it from gas, or they have to get it from wherever. So it'd be great if we could use 100% of the time use wind and solar, but it's just not realistic at this point in time. And we need to have pragmatic policies. And I think that's what Trump brought. You might not like the way he talks. You might not, he is rough around the edges. He can definitely be a bit of a jerk sometimes, but people elected him this time for his policies, not for who he is as an individual. That's why some people like him as an individual too, but I think that's why he won.
Yeah, no, and yeah, for sure. And energy, I mean, just to wrap up on that, maybe is there was a story that hit the news tape this morning that I read, was close to home, is a company that I believe is Quebec-based, is in the business of building out data centers. Mm-hmm. Now, everybody knows by now that artificial intelligence, data centers, consumption of electricity, cryptocurrency mining, it's all going to cause energy demand to go through the roof.
Yes.
So this company wanted to build a data center in Quebec and tried to get a contract with Hydro-Quebec to supply them with the energy to operate the data center. And Hydro-Quebec said, we can't do that contract because we don't have the excess energy to provide you with. So we live in Canada. We've got every resource any country would ever want. We're the envy of the world. And you're telling me that we haven't been thinking forward enough to think about how are we going to increase, power generation into the future. So instead of planning for that, what our current administration prefers to do is find out ways to, keep one of our most valuable resources that, creates tax revenue and is a benefit to all Canadians. Let's keep it in the ground in the sake of carbon reduction. So what will happen, or what is happening, is we're going to have shortage of energy despite the fact that we have every resource in our country to produce more and export it to the south. It's madness. It's madness, because this effort by Ottawa to rein in carbon emissions, we are 1.5% by most measures of the world's carbon emissions footprint. There was a report recently published, I think by National Bank, that cited our energy is twice as clean as American energy. It's more responsible in terms of ESG dynamics, and yet we are the ones shooting ourselves in our collective economic foot by keeping our energy resources in the ground, which is what drives Albertans crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. I'm on their side. So
but imagine Alberta, and I think it's pretty rich for the rest of Canada, and I want some Canadians to actually think about this. Imagine you're Alberta, and they give transfer payments to provinces like Quebec. How the federal system works is the rich provinces give money to the provinces that don't have as much money, and so they give. So us, we're a net recipient of money, which mostly comes from Alberta. So imagine the fact that you have a bunch of Quebecers waving our finger saying you guys shouldn't be pulling the oil out of the ground, while at the same time taking the money that they're paying, which, by the way, the tax revenue they're generating is from energy production. Like, just think about how hypocritical that is.
Well, it's a lack of education.
Yes.
Quite frankly, in my opinion, is what are we're going to go off on another tangent here, and we could probably go for an hour on this topic. Is what are our kids being taught in school?
Yeah, that's a whole
like the importance of economics.
That's a whole debate.
And the importance of energy to Canada should be something that's taught in school. Not the opposite. Let's ban hydrocarbons because they're bad. Are they bad? Sure, they've always been bad. I mean, cars polluted the environment. But if we stop using hydrocarbons or stop producing them, it makes no difference on the world stage, because Saudi Arabia, Russia, the U.S.,
China,
they're all going to keep producing and using.
And especially at a time where China and India, they're about to enter, like the people are moving from out of poverty to the middle class. Well, when a population moves up in status, their quality of living gets better, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to have a bigger ecological footprint. They're just going to use more energy. They're going to buy a car. They're going to have a house. They're going to go on vacations. All these things use energy, which emits CO2 emissions into the world. For us to say, well, they shouldn't be using that much energy, it's just not realistic. And it doesn't matter what Canadians say or what Americans say either. They're going to do what they're going to do. India and China are going to do what they're going to do. And we have no control over that. So if we think CO2 emissions right now are bad coming out of India and China, wait another 10 years. They're going to be way worse.
Yeah.
And with the AI boom, it's going to be a lot higher. So again, we're not saying don't invest in more efficient energy consumption vehicles like nuclear, natural gas, or solar, or wind. But we also have to be pragmatic and realistic about the fact that they're going to do what they're going to do. Energy consumption, and you've mentioned this before, it's not going to go down. It's going to go up.
Significantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Significantly in the world. And the CEO of the old CEO of Google said the same thing. He's like, all this net zero stuff. He goes, I don't think we should be trying to have this as a goal, because we're never going to get to a net zero emission world anyways.
Well, nuclear effectively is net zero. There's zero emissions from nuclear.
But right now it can't power the world.
Right now it can't, right?
Yeah, maybe one day. I mean,
so
you know more about this than I do.
It goes back to that, when was the best time to invest in crypto?
Yesterday.
When was the best time to invest in nuclear infrastructure? Probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
What's the second best time? Like today.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying invest in crypto today. That's not my point. That was maybe a very bad example.
Yeah.
But I mean, we can kick the can down the road and say we're going to ignore it.
Yeah.
But if you want carbon-free energy that's consistent, it doesn't fluctuate with wind, solar, or the flow of a river or a dam, it's nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
And the technology's there. The technology is better than ever. And by the way, Canada has the highest grade uranium in the world, and we have plenty of it. So it's not like we have to worry about where the uranium to drive these nuclear generators is going to come from. It's going to come from within our own borders.
I have a question. Couldn't they make, because one of the concerns for nuclear energy is having it in the city, and if it blows up and everybody dies, and it's a valid concern.
Yeah.
I know it's very safe, but David Sachs, we were talking about earlier, he said the same thing. He goes, everyone is banging their fist. We need nuclear in the USA. We need nuclear. We need nuclear. And he goes, okay. Goes, are you going to be okay with having a nuclear power plant in your backyard? Goes, no, you're not.
Yeah.
So it's like, he goes, just be careful what you say. But my question for you is, in Canada, couldn't we have like nuclear power plants, let's say, 500 kilometers north? I mean, no one lives in the north. Couldn't we just put nuclear power plants there and then import the energy to all the major metropolitan cities?
Yeah, it would hurt the elk. Apologies to the elk.
But we could do that, right?
Well, I mean, I'm no engineer, but power from James Bay provides electricity to Manhattan. Fair enough. If you can move electrons from James Bay to New York City, why can't you move electrons from a remote area in the north to a city? The modular technology, the modular reactor technology, for what I know about it, is it's a cookie cutter template reactor, right? Like the technology's there, and Canadian technology is really cutting edge on the world stage with this.
For nuclear?
For the modular, the small, it's called SMRs, small modular reactors.
Okay. So
in other words, you put a reactor on the 100 miles from a city of 200,000 people, and you're done. That's your electricity into perpetuity, or as long as that reactor is working. You're not burning anything. You're not carrying anything to the reactor other than uranium, enriched uranium, to run the reactor, right? So if you're really concerned about emissions, this is a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. It's a no-brainer. And as far as the risk, I mean, there's nuclear reactors all over the planet. In the U.S. I mean, you can go to cities in the U.S. and they don't stand out. Like, there's no sign that says this is a reactor.
Like
stay
in the Simpsons.
clear.
Remember the Simpsons?
Yeah. So I mean, well, Three Mile Island is being recommissioned. I mean, I remember in my late teens when the reactor melted down in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Yeah. It was shocking to the world because the environmental impact and the health impact around Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, because of that reactor. I'm not sure if it was Google or Amazon or one of the big players recently is paying, I believe, or contracting to recommission that reactor to get enough electrons to power their AI initiatives. So in Canada, we better wake up quickly and think about how we're going to do this, because if you fall behind in AI, there's an economic impact to that on many different fronts.
And we'll touch on that after. Let's move along here.
Yeah.
Trump has some appointments. Some say they're controversial. Some say they're not. We got Scott Bessent in the Treasury Secretary, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. We got Doge, obviously, Musk and Ramaswamy. RFK, it's another one. Chris Wright. So let's get to the first one. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, going to replace Janet Yellen. Thoughts on Scott Bessent?
Positive.
For the markets?
Yeah.
Why?
And the economy. Experienced, smart, knowledgeable. Same as smart, I guess. He gets it. Wall Street roots, hedge fund roots. He understands how things work. Yet he has a reputation for being responsible. So I don't think there will be much controversy coming from that appointment or from his roles and responsibilities, unless there's friction with Trump, and then he decides to fire him, which of course in his first administration that became a revolving door, right? Yeah. By the end, who wants to work for him? So hopefully he's learned. He seems to have learned, because a lot of his appointments, to me, are strong ones.
I think he has too.
Yeah, so I like Bessent. I think he's good. He's good for my business.
Okay. So in other words, he's going to make more favorable regulations, or he's going to deregulate the financial markets. Yeah,
but with a certain air of responsibility too. It's not going to be a Wild West.
2008 subprime mortgage situation.
It's not going to be the Wild West, in my opinion. He's too experienced to allow that to happen.
Okay. And just touching on that, I want to say quickly, a lot of people, when they think about deregulation, they go, deregulation so these rich people can make more money. And it's true that they're probably going to make more money. But deregulation, we're at a point now where the West, there's so many rules and regulations. I mean, just come to Canada. You can't get anything done. Yeah. So the fact that, and the Citadel CEO, what's his name again? Ken Griffin?
Yeah.
The bigger thing, because the interviewer started talking about tariffs, he goes, that's not even close to the most important thing. He goes, the Trump presidency, what it signaled to the rest of the world was that we are open for business. And if you make it easy for businesses to operate, it's going to be beneficial for everybody. And so you're saying Scott Bessent, it would be good for that?
Positive, yeah.
Next, I love this one, and I have my opinion on this. Musk and Ramaswamy.
Yeah.
Doge, Department of Government Efficiency.
big aspirations. I think people would like to see less government. I'll say good luck with that. Because the way Washington works, it is going to be an uphill battle to get half of the things done a tenth of the things that they want to get done accomplished. First of all, there's a difference between being an entrepreneur in the private sector and Washington. They are like completely different.
And I just want to add on a little detail. Musk and Ramaswamy, they don't have the authority to actually fire anyone from the administrative state. They can give their recommendations to the Trump cabinet, who then would or would not fire the people or the recommendations that Musk and Ramaswamy are making.
Yeah.
So the media spins it as like, oh, Elon Musk is going to be able to come in and fire everybody. No, he doesn't even have the authority to do that. He can just give his recommendations to Trump's cabinet, and I kind of agree with you.
Yeah, it's not good luck with that again, right? It's like he wants to cut $2 trillion from a $6.5 trillion budget. So I could have my numbers wrong.
That's right,
but it's a lot.
So Musk wants to trim $2 trillion from a $6.5 trillion budget. Yeah, good luck with that. So this would mean reducing spending by a third.
Yeah,
that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah,
this would require cuts to mandatory services like defense, health, Social Security. Trump has already explicitly said he's not touching Social Security, and touching Social Security in the United States would be political suicide. So that's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Essentially, they'll have no power. It's a good story.
Yeah, I think it's a good
and
for the media.
It will have some impact, on Trump's image. But I am highly skeptical that anything significant changes in Washington.
So do you think that? I think Elon's got to know this. Do you think the bigger reason why Elon Musk has been so present or was so present in this election was for that? Do you think it's because he actually cares about the country, or do you think it's because it's going to benefit his businesses like SpaceX, like X? Me personally, I think it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, who's the biggest buyer of SpaceX? It's the government.
Yeah.
And who's the government right now, the current administration? Just take California, for example. So they want to continue to give subsidies to electric vehicle manufacturers, except for Tesla. And, California is no secret that they're Democrats, a blue state. And they've explicitly said, we'll give subsidies, we'll continue to give EV subsidies, except to Tesla. And I think Trump kind of knew if Trump didn't, Elon knew if Trump didn't get elected that he'd probably have some problems with his businesses because, he's pretty vocal about how governments attack him. Probably exaggerates a little bit, but I think there's definitely is some truth to that. I made the bet with my father that if the Harris campaign won, X would cease to exist by the end of her tenure. I honestly believe that, and maybe I'm wrong, but
yeah. Back to EVs for a second. Trump says, I don't care. We don't sell our EVs because of that. But I know in our circles, in our neck of the woods, my friends who have Teslas, part of the reason for buying one is because the government gave them $8,000 to buy one.
Which the manufacturers, the auto manufacturers lobbied for. Like they all went, everyone thinks the government just said, oh, they want to incentivize people to buy electric vehicles. But it was the auto manufacturers who went to the government and said, because they're like, crap, we can't compete against just a normal car. It's going to be too expensive. They went to the government to lobby for the government on their dime or our dime to give these subsidies or give like a check back to someone who bought an EV. Yeah. That was the auto manufacturer's idea.
Looking recently at the headlines, right? So Northvolt, that project has imploded and is producing batteries for EVs in Quebec. It's happening all over the place. Lion Electric that builds electric school buses, they're teetering on the edge. Lithium prices tumbled. So, this dream world where everybody will drive an EV because it's good for the climate. Mm-hmm. Disregarding where the electrons come from for your electric vehicle.
To build a battery.
Right, and the copper that comes from a dirty mine that has to use energy, hydrocarbons to move the copper and then refine it. All of these things that go into an electric vehicle were basically ignored. So now we're stuck in a situation where we're realizing quickly that EV adoption especially when is it Ottawa that said by 2035, I
Yep.
think, you're not allowed to sell an internal
Which isn't
combustion.
gonna
It's
happen.
insane.
It's not gonna happen.
Insane.
Yeah.
You talk about, shooting ourselves in our collective economic
Well,
foot.
the grid's not even going to be able to handle it.
No,
It's
for
not
sure.
gonna
And people don't want it.
No.
People don't want it. Like, I don't want one. I don't want an electric vehicle. If I was just puttering 5 kilometers to work, maybe I would.
Yeah, or lived in California.
Yeah.
I'd buy one if we had a different climate. I would consider buying one. Maybe not though.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I kind of like internal combustion engines. I mean, but
You're not
anyways,
allowed
that's
to
a whole another story, right? But the reality is that EV adoption is not happening, and it's not being after being forced on people. Basically, it's not going to happen at the rate that we've anticipated. So again, government mismanagement with trying to force an agenda upon the populace that simply makes no sense.
Next appointee, Chris Wright, the Energy Secretary. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's good for Canada. Because,
why is this good for Canada?
Well, because our biggest export to the States is energy, oil and gas.
Yeah.
He's from a border state, I believe, or close to the border.
Yeah.
He's in the industry. He understands the importance of it. And I think if you're in that industry, you understand certainly the importance that Canada plays in the North American energy complex. So again, circling back to tariffs on Canadian energy, it ain't happening.
RFK. Does he have any impact on markets? Not really.
No, well, on the pharmaceutical sector.
I heard that he wants to. Now again, will this pass? Highly doubt it. I heard he wanted to ban pharma companies from being able to make commercials. Because the United States is one of 2 countries where pharmaceutical companies are allowed to advertise to sell their products. That's the speculation, what he wants to go after. He wants to say, you guys aren't allowed to do that anymore, which would in turn, that would be a massive hit to the legacy media companies, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox. Over 50% of the revenue comes from pharma advertising, which I didn't know until about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So that could be, I don't know, is that just him trying to attack the legacy media? Is that him trying to attack pharma? Is that him trying to attack both? Who knows?
Well, personally, I'm opposed to that.
Opposed
to banning those commercials because I find them highly entertaining. When you listen to those ads, the disclaimers at the end about all the side effects, it's like, you know what? I'll live with the disease. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease.
I imagine his intentions are rooted in doing the right thing for America. He doesn't really have a background in health. And so given those things, I find it hard to believe he's going to actually get the appointment. I don't think it'll pass through the Congress or through the Senate.
You're probably right.
He also wants to make Americans more healthy.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you look at today.
Yeah. But it's a personal choice, right? I mean, making yourself more healthy is a personal choice. I don't think him being in charge of health is going to stop people from wolfing down Big Macs like there's no tomorrow, or eating Fritos and Doritos and drinking massive bottles of Coke. Like, it's not going to happen. So what really is going to be the end result of him being there? Is he even going to have any success? I'm skeptical.
Fair. All right, here's the juicy one. Tariffs.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, and we've already kind of touched on this, so there's a lot of information being tossed around for tariffs right now. Trump threatened to put a 25% tariff on everything coming from Canada over to the U.S. as well as Mexico. He's threatened the BRICS countries with their currency if they don't want to continue to use the U.S. dollar. That I think he said he wanted to put a 100% tariff on them. Again, I think he's just puffing out his chest. I don't think he's actually going to do any of this. But tariffs are, this is a broad topic. Let's get into tariffs. First of all, why do tariffs exist in the first place?
Protectionism.
And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the guy was, I forget the guy's name, but he basically said, so if you look at Trump wanted to tariff, I think it was Volkswagen or something. So basically an auto manufacturer for cars that go into the U.S. It's a Japanese manufacturer. And then the gentleman, he brought up the point, he goes, well, why wouldn't we tariff them? I mean, Japan does the same thing to American cars. When America exports cars to Japan, they put, I think it was a 20 or 25%. They're always changing from administration to administration.
Yeah.
But he goes, other countries put tariffs on our products. Why can't we put tariffs on those products coming in? And then, because right now the sentiment is tariffs are bad because it's going to cause inflation. I think that's the negative connotation to tariffs. Unless am I missing anything? That's like,
for the most part, yes, because
yeah.
what will happen is the manufacturer or the company that's paying the tariff will pass the cost on to the consumer. They're not going to eat it.
Which they will.
They will probably pass some of it, if not all of it.
Yes. But then the counter argument is, at least this is Trump's argument, he's obviously not going to admit that's going to be inflationary. And will it be inflationary to have tariffs? Yes, it probably will. But to reshore the manufacturing, I think his logic is if the costs go up, but jobs are being reshored and manufacturing is being reshored back to North America, people are going to be able to afford this increase in price. I think that's the logic, and I'll let you kind of take it from here.
So I would think that reshoring manufacturing, where a guy making, widgets on a production line, it doesn't make any sense. Like sometimes we're better off buying materials or products or input products into another product externally because it's cheaper. Like Americans buy Canadian soft lumber because it goes into houses and we've got a lot of it and it's cheap, but they tariff it because they want to protect their own softwood lumber industry. And then you've got the lobby group that is trying to protect that. So that's an element of protectionism. At the same time, even with tariffs, our lumber is pretty attractive to home builders in the U.S. When it comes to tariffing a nation that is a communist country with no rule of law, that uses slavery to produce steel, and it's cheap steel, and you can import it into the States way cheaper than what you can get domestic steel for. Clearly, I'm referring to China. You have a choice. You keep purchasing, a product from a nation that has completely different laws than we do, and principles in terms of freedom and workers' rights and all of that. Or we buy it. We continue to encourage a domestic industry, because if you lose your steel industry completely, then you're reliant on foreigners for your steel. So I think this is what Trump is trying to do by reshoring critical industry. Like some things are critical, some are not.
Energy would be critical.
Yeah, cheap, crappy patio furniture that's going to rest in 3 years for your backyard, that's not critical. So we'll continue to buy that from China. Things that are critical, like certain minerals, certain steels, whatever, it makes sense to go elsewhere because it makes those products cheaper for domestic consumers, the American consumer. So I think that tariffs have to be selective. I agree you have to protect certain industries, but not all. There's a balance, and it should be a two-way street. Like, if we're going to buy your steel, you've got to allow us to sell products or services in your country. It's only fair trade. And when the other side says, well, no, we're not going to allow you to do that, then you have an unfair tariff system. So I understand that as well. When it comes to Canada, I don't see any tariffs coming. To me, it's positioning for renegotiation of the U.S. MCA, NAFTA as we refer to it. That comes up July 1st of 2026, I believe, where you can opt out. So I think he's positioning for that. Let's get it done early would actually be a good thing. But I think from Canada's perspective, we have to understand that there's a lot of things that we provide the U.S. that are really valuable. We have supply chains and manufacturing, auto being the obvious example, where certain parts will cross the border 4, 5, 6, 7 times before the finished product is made. I don't see any way we change that. So therefore, with tariffs on Canada, it's just bluster. He's just positioning. It's the way he negotiates. He starts with an outrageous demand, and it'll work its way towards the middle. Common sense will prevail in the end, and he's not the negotiator. He can't just decide, I'm canceling the USMCA. That's it. We're out. It's 25% on Canada. There'll be so much pushback that he just won't be able to do it. It'll be in the courts forever. It'll be in the courts until he's no longer president. So he may be able to enact some of this stuff in the short term. To me, it's just bluster.
So what do you think he would be able to enact?
The one thing that sticks out in my mind, and this for some reason, it's a bee in his bonnet, is dairy. Remember the last time this came around, he said, well, we want to be able to sell American milk into the Canadian market, but we have a protectionist system to protect our dairy industry because
Canada does.
Yeah, because Canada does. We're a different country, right? Logistically, we're a big country. We want to protect our food system, which makes sense. And for some reason, Americans want to be able to sell, milk up here that might not even meet Canadian standards.
We have good milk in Canada. I will say that.
Yeah, well, in the States, from what I understand, there's additives or there's things that are put into milk that are not the same as the milk here. So these are all things that would have to be addressed. But I honestly think it was more of a point that he wanted to take to get votes in Wisconsin, where the dairy and cheese industry resides, because they feel like they can't sell dairy products into Canada because of our supply chain management system. But then we just can't sell softwood lumber into the U.S. without tariffs as well. So there's always a give and take. I think cooler heads will prevail, but I think what he's asking for at the outset is basically unreasonable. It's just a tactic. And what was interesting is when this story came out, when it hit the tape, that he just said, I'm putting 25% tariffs on Canada and U.S. and 100% on, or 10% more on China or something. He released that, I believe, on a Monday night after dinner when markets are closed. And so the reaction in currency markets was like the Canadian cent like fell like a penny and a half or a penny and a quarter, like almost immediately against the U.S. dollar. But, a few days later, it was back to normal. So why would he announce that? Because he wants an impact. He wants to see a reaction in the market so everybody pays attention. But in the after-hours market, things like that tend to happen. So I think even the release of that it was on X, right? That he said it, I think?
I think he said it on Truth first, then X picked it up, and because he always goes on Truth because he owns Truth.
You don't say something like serious
Yeah.
outside of like market hours. Like you just don't. There was a reason why he did it at that time.
And so why? This is the part I don't fully understand though. Why do markets not like the idea of tariffs, or maybe they do like the idea of tariffs? What do tariffs have to do with the financial markets?
It creates a higher level of uncertainty. Like take the auto industry, right? For parts that go into cars and trucks. I mean, if you're going to have tariffs on non-U.S. made auto parts, this is going to make the cost of a U.S. vehicle much higher.
Go up.
So it's going to impact the profit line and, quite frankly, the volume of sales of vehicles, right? And it's going to hurt the American consumer. So tariffs are generally damaging. It's a tax, in effect, right? It's a tax.
Yeah. I understand. All right, moving along. How are Trump's policies going to impact the markets?
We can circle back to what we just discussed, is uncertainty. The one thing that markets hate the most is uncertainty. Another recent example would be pre-election. I know for a fact there was a lot of hedging going on in investment circles, worried about what could happen after the election. Are we going to have another January 6th? Are we going to have legal battles over who won? In a way, regardless of who won, the markets were really relieved that it was certain. There was going to be no dispute, right?
I heard that too. I heard it was more important, that the markets like that more than the fact that Trump won. It was the fact that it was just like, okay, we have a clear winner.
Yes, absolutely. And why do markets like that? Because now you can plan. You can plan out your business for the next 5 years or whatever, knowing with certainty what is going to be the policies and the agenda. So markets like the fact that we are, hopefully we, at some point, but the U.S. is, reining in regulations to make it easier to do business, to encourage capitalism and do business in the U.S. and the markets like that, which is why so much of the inflows into equities have been into the U.S. markets. They are absolutely by far the best capital markets in the world, the best place to invest right now, without a doubt, is the U.S., and that trend doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. I mean, investment money is getting literally sucked out of Canada and sent to the States.
Is it concerning though, because the USA, they only represent 20 or 25% of the world's GDP?
Yeah.
But the market cap of all the American markets represents, I think it's 65 or 70% of the total market cap of all the stock markets around the world. Is that not a sign that perhaps it's overvalued? It's
a sign of margin of safety, right? There's less risk investing in the U.S. The best capital markets in the world. I mean, no doubt. I mean, the best, pro-commerce environment in the world is coming for the next 4 years. So where would you put your money? Like, do you invest in a Canadian bank or U.S. bank at this point in time when things are going to be, the economy could run gangbusters in the U.S. if these policies come into effect, and nothing unexpected upsets the apple cart. So money goes to the place where it will generate the best return and have the least amount of risk. That's the United States. And unfortunately, in Canada, we are losing that battle because of some policies that we have that need to be changed, in my opinion. This is a huge problem in Canada, is capital flows away from our country. And it's not like, if one day we wake up and we say, well, we're going to make business, easier to do in Canada. We're going to reduce regulation. We're going to reduce constraints on energy production. We're in now. You know what? It might be too late because the states are making these changes now. So the money is going there now. The money will not come to Canada. Where would you invest? If you were to invest in a company right now, where would you invest? In the U.S. or Canada?
No-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. So either we change our tune in this country or we suffer the economic consequences. And like I said, you don't flip a switch. You got to plan these things out. Companies plan capital spending for the long term. So if you're going to build a new plant or start a new business,
oil companies,
where are you going to start it?
They're going to want, they want 20, 25-year contracts.
It's not even that. It's just certainty that we're actually going to be in business, that you want our product.
Yeah.
The uncertainty now is, what if Trump does put 25% tariffs on Canadian energy? That's going to really hurt you and I.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think people appreciate that. But again, it's not going to happen because they would be shooting themselves in the foot as well. So it would be, tit for tat. It's bad. And so it's not going to happen.
So I want to, now that we're on this topic, I want to read, this is from the economist of the National Bank, I think it was.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't remember his name.
Stefan Marion.
So Stefan Marion, this is very interesting. So Canada's productivity downturn persists. Newly released data shows that business sector productivity contracted at an annualized rate of 1.5% Q3 2024, the third consecutive quarterly decline, and the ninth drop in the past 10 quarters. That's insane. So in contrast, U.S. productivity surged by a robust 2.2%. It goes without saying that Canada must urgently develop policies to incentivize businesses to increase their investments domestically if we hope to enhance our standard of living. So it's just exactly like you said, and there's a graph going around, a clear decoupling of GDP per capita since 2015. I don't remember what happened in 2015. What happened in 2015? Anyways, something happened in our country in 2015.
We know what happened in 2015.
Yeah. So in 2015, something different changed in Canada, and there's literally a complete decoupling of GDP per capita. And GDP per capita, it's an important metric because sometimes, our current government, they'll say, GDP keeps going up. It's great. We have GDP growth. Well, if you import a lot of people, then it's just GDP at the end of the day is how many people do you have and how productive are they? So, but if you take a GDP per capita, it's like how productive is each person? It's more important to look at GDP per capita as opposed to just the aggregate GDP. So there's a massive decoupling. We're at 60%, I think, now of American GDP per capita. And it's a major issue. We've been talking about this all the time. And let's have the last segment of this podcast to focus on Canada and how we get out of this mess. And I'll just preface that with this. I'm confident that because Trump got elected, and the fact that we are going to have very high chances of having a majority conservative government by November 2025. I think it's going to be great for business. We have a conservative premier, in Alberta. We have, which I would argue is the most important province economically speaking for Canada. We have a conservative governor in Ontario. I think I am optimistic about the future of Canada because I think there's a new guard coming in. The current guard, we've expressed our opinion before a couple of times. I don't think they're qualified to be running the country. They keep demonstrating that time and time again. So let's your thoughts.
I would agree. And you omitted BC, which recently had a provincial election, and the Conservatives came very close.
Yeah, they almost won. And they haven't been conservative since like the 60s, I think, right? Or something?
It's crazy how long it's been. I mean, they really, moved up in popularity, or popularity just in votes.
Yeah.
Came very close to upsetting. So I think people are starting to get it. As far as the future for Canada, I mean, if you look at the Toronto Stock Exchange or the S&P TSX Composite Index, which is an index of Canadian stocks, right?
Yeah.
It's making all-time highs. If you went back, a year ago, don't quote me exactly, but let's say over the last few years, we have lagged the U.S. markets, and now we've played catch-up. So this isn't because that things are all rosy right now in Canada. Markets are always looking ahead, right? They discount the future. So to me, it's very clear that the Canadian equity markets are discounting a change in regime, a change in economic policy to be more like the U.S., favorable to business and economic development. Stop over-regulation, over-taxing, stopping progress, because the more we do that, the less investment we end up with in Canada. It's that simple. It's a very simple equation. So I think change is coming, and I think that investors realize that, so they start buying up Canadian stocks ahead of time.
Can you comment on, I don't know if this has been enacted yet or not, but I know that Chrystia Freeland, our finance czar, has definitely been floating it. She was speaking with pension funds, and pension funds are responsible for finding the best return for their, I guess we'll call them shareholders, well, for basically for us, for Canadians. She wants pension funds to be buying Canadian companies, but pension funds need to find the best returns. So why would they buy Canadian companies when they could be buying American companies, because the return's better? So to my understanding, she's basically saying to pension funds, no, you have to keep buying Canadian companies. But why would you? Can you comment on this? I don't know if I'm saying this properly. Like, has she forced pension funds to keep the capital within Canada?
It's on the table. These discussions are on the table, and some of it is actually coming from, I think, pension funds themselves.
But this is like Banana Republic stuff.
Well, money is flowing away from Canada.
Yes.
That's the problem, right? So money flow, capital flow out of Canada hurts everything economically in Canada. So they're trying to encourage people to invest in Canada. My pushback would be, like, I manage a hedge fund. I have a responsibility. I have a fiduciary duty to do the best I can for the people that I invest money on behalf of. Don't tell me I have to invest in Canada because I'm Canadian. Give me a reason to invest in Canada. If there's a reason to invest in Canada, I'd happily do it, right? There's an advantage. There's an advantage if you have a dividend-paying stock in Canada that you're not taxed like you would be in the U.S. if you owned a dividend-paying company in the U.S. I prefer to invest domestically. It's my own backyard and it's my own country. But give me a damn reason to do it. Like right now, there's reasons not to invest in Canada. Some sectors are good to invest in my view. Others, you simply can't do it in Canada. Technology, why would I, the technology sleeve of my fund, right? Why would I buy Canadian tech stocks when I can buy U.S. tech stocks that have exposure to the world?
I mean, the only tech company I can think of off the top of my head for Canada is Shopify.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other company.
Yeah, it's not really a Canadian company. I mean, it's domiciled.
It started in Canada.
It's domiciled in Ottawa. Started, I think, a Concordia alumni, I think.
I'm not sure.
Runs the company, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I mean, it's really a global company, and there's a company that's utilizing AI to better their business. I mean, it's they've been in the news a lot lately because they've really upped their game. I mean, the stock suffered for quite a while, but it's been doing very well recently with helping people start small businesses, and it's all it's done with AI and stuff. So definitely, it's a leading technology company on a global scale. But it's still not Amazon or Google or Apple close. So if you want,
I think, and sorry to cut you off there, but I just wanted to add, I think one of the bigger issues that Canada has right now, or the government, is they try and get their hands in everything, and they try and control everything. So just AI, for example, I think Trudeau, he gave a grant not too long ago to like these, I don't even know what it is. He throws money all over the place.
Yeah.
Let the private sector come in and do their thing and tax them a little bit. And basically that's how you build infrastructure. So for example, it's like them trying to create electric chargers to power electric vehicles. Why do they want to do it? Just let the private sector do it. Like back in the day when people started driving cars, the private sector built all the gas stations. The government has no business building gas stations. They shouldn't be trying to build electric vehicles. He shouldn't be trying to control AI. He shouldn't be trying to control everything. Get out of the way. And I think this is one of the reasons why investors and markets and capital does not want to come to Canada. The government gets in the way of everything. Trudeau wants to have his hands in everything.
Yeah, the nanny state. I mean, that's a very astute observation. I mean, historically, government tends to screw things up, not make them better.
Yes.
So if you really want to incentivize AI build out in Canada, incentivize it with some financial incentives. Don't try and run it yourselves. You're not capable of running it yourselves.
And you're not going to beat an AI company.
No,
you're just not going to win.
No, encourage free markets, encourage economic investment. And we have a lot of smart people in Canada.
Yes.
The father of AI is from U of T.
I didn't know.
We have an infrastructure of education and smart people in this country and the capability to do it. Hinton is his last name. So we have what's required. Stop trying to make it difficult to do business in Canada, bottom line. Stop making it so expensive and cumbersome to do business here, because over time, this is seriously going to impact our standard of living.
Well, it already has. And
it already has, but
it's going to continue, and the reality is that he's going to stay in power. I mean, as long as they're supposed to have a non-confidence vote next week, and the NDP doesn't look like Jagmeet Singh is going to bite. Apparently he ripped up the contract, and obviously he didn't. So It's realistically speaking, we're not looking at an election until November 2025. The way I see it, honestly, is the longer that the Liberals stay in power, the bigger the majority government's going to be with regards to Conservatives winning.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, if Singh wants to, stick with doing nothing, I mean, they know the polls. I mean,
yeah, of course.
That's hazardous to your own well-being politically, because
and
I think Canadians
knows.
will remember, right? Like,
Of
you
course.
aligned yourself with them, and you enabled them.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you were an enabler.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's going to come back to haunt them. I don't know if they recognize that right now, but that's just my view.
I'm always curious about what's going on in his head and why he doesn't. Do you think it's true that because he wants his pension? I feel like that's just a media.
I've heard that, and I don't know. Does he need a pension?
Well, that's what I mean. Like I looked it up. So the Conservatives kind of spun it as, it's a $2 million pension, but it's $54,000 a year. What are you gonna do with I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think there's other motivations.
Well, there is a shortage of teachers as well, so he can go back to his old career. I'm sure he'll find a job.
But yeah, it's. I think just Canada. The productivity issues it's bad. Would you say it's crisis level yet, or? I mean, we're at 60% of the GDP per capita of the United States. We were neck and neck in 2015.
Yeah.
It's fallen off a cliff.
The way Canada has fallen economically compared to other G7 or G20 or even developed countries,
we're the worst after
is
COVID.
shocking.
Yeah,
it's shocking.
It's crazy.
And it's a trend. So trends stay in effect until they no longer are a trend. So the trend right now says we're in a downward spiral. So if we don't stop it at some point soon, we're all going to feel it. You might not realize it, but every Canadian is going to feel it for sure.
The nice thing, though, and this is why I'm optimistic, everybody knows that once the current Liberal government is out of power, hope is there, and I think everyone knows they're on the way out.
Yeah.
And like everybody, the
markets
banks say
are saying
it's
that.
Everybody's. It's not a secret anymore. We're allowed to say it. Doesn't mean we're anti this or anti that. Everyone knows the Liberals are on their way out. They're going to be done in November 2025, maybe sooner. The country. I mean, what are they pulling at? 20%, 18%?
Something
It's
pretty low.
like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Danielle Smith, the premier of Alberta, when Stephen Guilbeault, they want to put an emissions cap in Alberta. Or for energy production, you can kind of comment to that. And it's like, she was pissed off. She was so pissed. And one of the reporters asked her, goes, "You look like you're pissed off." She goes, "I am pissed off." She's like, "I'm not going to listen to a government and a guy in Stephen Guilbeault who doesn't know anything about this." And she's like, she goes, "What are they pulling at? Like 20%?" She's like, "I'm not going to listen to these guys. They're on their way out the door. We're going to fight this." And she goes, "It's a shame that, we were working together with Stephen Guilbeault for months and months and months. And then they pull a fast one and they do something like this." So it's like everyone's sick of these guys. They're ideologues. They don't know what they're doing. They're not qualified to be running the country. Capital flows leaving Canada. No one wants to come to Canada to invest. Not good for our country. I'm hopeful about the future.
The bottom line is, the question in front of all Canadians when we have the next election is, do you want to be aligned with the U.S. economy, or do you want to become like a European economy? Like, which do you prefer? Personally, I think we want to be aligned with the U.S. economy and prosper along with them. And it can be done if we just play our cards right. So to me, that's the big question, is what do we want as Canadians? I mean, I want to prosper economically. It is the most important thing.
Do you think it will be done?
The stock market says yes. As I said.
Are you hopeful about the future too? In Canada?
Given the other option, yeah, I have to be. Being pessimistic is not fun. So you have to be optimistic.
I'm optimistic too.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic too.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end it.
Sounds good.
Would you like to add anything else?
No, that's good.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.